There's that half-serious pseudo-joke line, the one, we live in a society. Well, I would agree with that. We live in a society. It's rather obvious, is it not? But the more pertinent question to pose is, what kind of society do we live in? And I'm sure every Tom, Dick, and Harry out there has an answer to that question. Now, I'm not going to make any grand proclamations affecting the entire macro scale of humanity here, but I did want to take the time to talk about and maybe analyze one aspect of society that is being presented to us by means of Hollywood or multimedia or the mainstream, or however you want to put it. I am, of course, talking about the new Joker film, which has given us thus far 2 different trailers and a boatload of background information. What they've done in this film is essentially reinvent the Joker, giving him a different backstory, changing how he became what we know as Batman's arch enemy and the epitome of the implacable villain in Gotham City. And what they've done is actually pretty ingenious, if not very, very manipulative. So we live in a society, that's true, but what kind of society? The kind of society that would take some of its worst off members and not just ignore them. That's just par for the course. We all do this to varying degrees. The homeless, the weak, the ill. No, they don't just ignore them, this society. They demonize them. And based on all the information I've read and received and my own observations of the trailers, I can tell you that this is an intentional move on the part of the mainstream, Hollywood in this case, to take some of the most downtrodden individuals in modern American society and transform them into not just people who are to be ignored and people who, frankly speaking, most people don't give a rat's ass about, but actual villains, bad people, as it were, the worst of the worst. After all, what could be worse than being an evil, malevolent, cackling madman? Not much, as far as I'm concerned, at least as they're presented here. I'm willing to withdraw my view should the film pan out otherwise, but I don't think that's going to happen. Now, I don't think this is a coincidence. I don't think that this is untimely. Quite the opposite. I think this is very timely. Because what we've seen, especially in recent years, is a false interpretation, an indictment, if you will, of lonely people, specifically lonely men, as malevolent, violent, evil, etc., etc. And what this film does, in a nutshell, is it takes this archetype, this unfortunate archetype that's becoming all too prevalent, all too common in our society, a lonely man who's not terribly successful, he's middle-aged, he lives with his mother, he has no real social contacts, his girlfriend ostensibly breaks up with him, etc., etc. And rather than giving into despair, he goes mad and he becomes violent. Now, there are a couple of things to say about this. Obviously, they're in part basing this on some of the events that have occurred in recent years regarding so-called you-know-whats, among whom very few individuals have engaged in malicious behavior that resulted in the loss of human life. And they're taking this really small sample size and extrapolated from that and projected onto everybody in that category. Basically, lonely men, men who are invisible to society, and many, many men are. This has always been the great paradox of being a man, and it's a paradox that is almost never recognized in society. It is the paradox of either being too visible or invisible. In the case of the few men that are too visible, well, we have a guy like Donald Trump. Everyone talks about Donald Trump. Those who love him, those who hate him, it doesn't really matter. He's the president of the United States. But the same could apply to many, many different men, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, etc., etc. But these men are a tiny minority. a fraction of a minority of men. Most men are somewhere in between, but indeed, ever greater numbers of invisible men exist out there. The homeless, but not just the homeless. Men who scrape by, they get by somehow, but are not acknowledged by anyone but themselves. Living in social isolation, not being able to connect with people, etc., etc. And these people are normally just ignored, or at least historically they had just been ignored. Perhaps they were frowned upon or looked down upon. But in the current year, we now have an active attempt to not just ignore them, as had hitherto been the case, but to vilify them and demonize them, something that is largely unprecedented. Sure, people historically have not liked outcasts, but the way they're going about this is, in my view, the absolute worst way possible. Now, I do realize this is quote-unquote entertainment, it's fiction, but you can take examples of the case presented in this film, and by the way, the Joker is played by a very skinny and middle-aged looking Joaquin Phoenix, and this guy lives with his mother, who appears to become terminally ill at some point in time. He's of middling success. He's not socially approachable or successful. He's awkward, etc., etc. This can also be found in reality, and it's not that uncommon. And what this film does is, rather than presenting a typical case, and the typical case here of men who are outcasts, put out to the street, or just ignored and largely invisible, is that they give in to despair. Sometimes they'll turn to chemicals. Sometimes they will turn their own hands against themselves. But it's very, very rare indeed to get the type of behavior, and I do realize it's a film based on a comic book, however loosely these days, very, very rare indeed for that to happen. For a guy simply to snap and then engage in some of the most ignominious activities one could conceive of. And if I were to say that's contrived, that would be an understatement. So, what do we see on display here? Hollywood, or the mainstream, is taking what I regard as some of the most vulnerable members of American society, because it is based in the United States. It's a commentary on American social life, in fact, and saying, no, these guys, they're not just in a state of despair. They're not just lonely. They're not just unsuccessful. They're not just unworthy of our attention. We'll take it a step further and escalate. They're worthy of the worst attention possible because they're bad people. And not just bad, they're the worst people out there. They become metaphorical monsters and lose their minds and do the worst things possible. And we all know how certain people operate and how they just absorb things without reflection. That is what is likely to happen with this film. To my view, it's not just a film about a different type of Joker who loses his mind in a different way. It's a characterization and a presentation of a situation that is all too common that many men face these days. And the film and the way they put things across, this just makes things that much worse. Now, it goes without saying that I could never expect Hollywood to offer clemency or a nuanced perspective on things. That's not entertaining. After all, the guy who's essentially a loser and snaps and blows the world up is a much more entertaining story than the guy who gives in to despair and decides to part ways from existence itself. That's not interesting. That's not funny. It's not exciting. This is much more glamorous. So, glamorous aside, and I can see that Hollywood needs to be glamorous to be Hollywood, after all, it is what it is. The film is a commentary on where we are these days. It's your friendly neighborhood Joker, so to speak. The guy who couldn't cut it, who couldn't hack it, and because of that, he goes on a rampage. That is the message they're trying to put across. I wouldn't be too surprised if there were further social media type reverberations that emanate from this film as a reflection or indeed an homage to certain individuals out there who have committed crimes, but also the general state of affairs for men, increasingly young men, but he's middle-aged there, all sorts of men who are, frankly speaking, marginalized, not acknowledged, etc., etc. I'm not saying that we can do anything about this, but it's always important to point these things out. And we see major shifts in the media. This, again, is not a coincidence. This piece, this film, is not just a reinvention of the story of the Joker in the context of DC Comics, but also a reinvention of the Joker in the context of the current year. And as I had recently discussed with Wojak and have discussed quite frequently, social isolation is on the rise. Depression, despair has been on the rise for decades. And of course, Hollywood is right there to profiteer off of that phenomenon, because what else would Hollywood do? But let's not be deceived by this. This isn't just an entertaining film. This is a commentary on certain types of men who, generally speaking, have nobody in life other than themselves. And it's not just saying you're the worst of the worst in terms of whether or not we pay attention to you. They're saying you're the worst of the worst, and you're also an evil villain. And that is absolutely not a message that these types of men need to hear. And I don't think it's a message that we need to hear more of, because we've already heard a mouthful of it from the mainstream media in the wake of various events that I need not go into. Clearly, this is not the old story of a Joker that was thrown into a chemical vat and wants to wreak vengeance upon the world and Gotham City and Batman and blah, 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 blah. They've personalized this and have attacked a certain sector of society that is not doing well to begin with, and it's going to make things for those men that much worse. Everyone, thanks for tuning in as always. If I'm still alive, I will check you out later, and enjoy your weekend, and may the gods watch over you. Bye-bye. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.